During the Cold War, America didn't just build bombs, it built weapons for the human mind. Frank Olson helped create them. He worked at the edge of science and secrecy, a world of aerosols, biological agents, and drugs designed to break people open. These weapons were meant for enemies, but in 1953, one of them turned inward. The truth serum the CIA worked so hard to perfect found an unintended target. A loyal scientist, a husband, a father. And when it worked, it didn't destroy a foreign threat. It pushed one man and the organization he served right up to the brink of collapse. Frank Olson didn't just create danger. At some point, he was treated as one. And in a system built on secrecy, speaking truth is a threat that cannot be allowed to persist. Tonight is the story of Frank Olson, a scientist trusted with America's most dangerous Cold War research, a man who believed he was protecting his country, until the tools he helped build began pulling the truth out of him instead. This isn't just a story about a mysterious death, or a government mind control experiment gone wrong. It's about what happens when a system built on lies, secrecy, and dark forces can no longer tell friend from foe, and turns on itself, with life-shattering consequences. Frank Olson was born in 1910 in Hurley, Wisconsin, small town, Midwestern. He was not raised to be a spy. He studied chemistry, met a classmate named Alice. She would later become his wife. Together they built a quiet life, 3 children, a home, stability. When World War II began, Olson joined the U.S. Army. He rose to the rank of captain. Not infantry, science. The war fast-tracked research that had once been unthinkable. In 1942, Olson was recruited into a tight circle of biological researchers led by Dr. Ira Baldwin. Baldwin ran America's biological weapons program. He believed scientists had a patriotic duty to explore every possibility. That belief would change Olson's life, because Baldwin introduced Olson to a man with no such doubts, Sidney Gottlieb. But that fateful meeting would come later. After the war, that boundary is challenged. In 1945, through Operation Paperclip, former Nazi scientists are secretly brought to the United States. Their chemical and biological research is not just studied, it is expanded. According to later accounts and declassified records, Frank Olson worked directly with former Nazi scientists who had developed biological and chemical weapons for the Third Reich. This included work on aerosolized anthrax, how it could be dried, weaponized, and dispersed, captured Nazi data, face-to-face consultations, shared techniques. The science accelerates, ethical distance collapses, borders both geographical and ethical dissolve. 1950, Project Bluebird begins. Its mandate is explicit: interrogation under coercion, hypnosis, isolation, drug-assisted questioning. The aim is not therapy, it is control and expulsion of secrets. 1951, Bluebird is expanded. Under the direction of CIA leadership, including Alan Dulles, who will soon become Director of Central Intelligence, Project Bluebird is renamed Operation Artichoke. The scope widens. The safeguards vanish. Internal documents pose an unthinkable question. Can a human being be controlled to the point of acting against his own instincts? This expansion is not accidental. To the men running these programs, the danger was not excess. It was hesitation. It reflects a new philosophy inside the CIA, that the mind itself is a battlefield. And by this point, Frank Olson is no longer on the margins. At Fort Detrick, he specializes in aerosols, how agents move through air, how they enter lungs, how environments become weapons. Artichoke needs that expertise, and it pulls Olson in, and he rises to among its highest ranks. Long before the full consequences were understood, this research left the laboratory, not in theory, in practice. December 1948 to February 1949, Operation Harness. In a series of secret trials conducted in the Caribbean, near Antigua, Frank Olson, along with British and American researchers, deploys biological agents into open air. Animals are placed in exposed test zones, sheep, goats, and monkeys, and aerosol clouds are released over them. The agents include anthrax, tularemia, and brucella. The results are immediate. Animals collapse, some convulse, many die. Hundreds, if not thousands of animals are killed. The purpose is blunt: to learn how far an invisible cloud can travel, how deeply it penetrates lungs, and how predictable its lethality can be. These are not theoretical exercises. This is the inner workings of modern warfare, and war is hell. September 20th, 1950, Operation Sea Spray. Less than 2 years later, that same logic moves closer to home. On September 20th, 1950, the U.S. Navy uses aerosolizers to release the bacteria Serratia marcescens into the air along the San Francisco coastline. The target is not an enemy, it's an American city. Enough material is released that later estimates suggest up to 5,000 particles could be inhaled by each of the city's 800,000 residents. A dose calibrated precisely. If the agent had been anthrax, it would have been sufficient to cause widespread, serious infection. Hospitals soon report clusters of rare infections. At least one death is later linked by physicians who investigated the outbreak. For scientists like Frank Olson, Operation Harness is not abstract. At Fort Detrick, Olson's work focuses on how biological agents leave the laboratory, how they are dried, how they are stabilized, how they are carried by wind and weather into living lungs. Harness is where those calculations become consequences. The laboratory becomes the real world. Once released, there is no recall, no off switch. Like opening Pandora's box, what escapes cannot be put back. This is the moment Olson's science stops being theoretical. It becomes something he has to live with. Less than 2 years later, that same logic moves closer to home, from animals to cities. This is no longer theory. These are full-scale rehearsals. August 1951. Pont Saint-Esprit, southern France. Without warning, hundreds fall ill. Witnesses describe bodies writhing in the streets, people screaming that serpents crawl from their stomachs, men convinced that tigers are stalking them from the rooftops, children clawing at walls they say are bleeding. One man leaps from a window to escape flames only he can see. Doctors are overwhelmed. Sedatives fail. Some patients must be restrained to keep them from tearing at their own skin. Official explanation? Contaminated bread. Ergot poisoning. But years later, journalists and researchers obtain CIA documents that show things might not be as they seem. They show U.S. intelligence actively researching LSD and related compounds in Europe at the same time, with Sandoz Laboratories, the sole producer of LSD for the U.S. military, being only 100 miles away. Multiple sources place Frank Olson in France that year. Some documents suggest he received materials connected to Pont Saint-Esprit. No document proves he released anything, as the documents that do link him were ordered buried, as discovered through a Freedom of Information Act request. But the timing is exact, the symptoms match, and the questions never stop. Everything appears to be going smoothly on the surface, until the so-called truth serum finds an unintended target in Frank Olson, and everything begins to unravel. There is a moment, a switch. November 18th, 1953, a cabin retreat at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. A semi-annual review between Army and CIA scientists. The people in that room? Not outsiders. They are the handful who understand what these programs really are. Olson is there because his division at Fort Detrick is doing work for the CIA, and Sidney Gottlieb is there as the CIA's chief chemical architect. By this point, already laying the groundwork for what will soon become MK Ultra. At dinner, conversation is ordinary. After dinner, a bottle of Cointreau appears, and inside that bottle, CIA officer Robert Lashbrook has placed approximately 70 micrograms of LSD. This isn't a prank. It's an experiment Gottlieb and Lashbrook are running on the room. Gottlieb later describes how quickly it hits. Boisterous laughter, people unable to focus, conversation collapsing. And then, about 20 minutes after, Gottlieb tells them what happened. They've been dosed. Not just Olson, almost everyone drinking. And crucially, Gottlieb isn't merely observing. He and his colleagues had a history of self-administration with LSD. They believed it was dynamite, but also, in their hands, manageable. Olson does not react like the others. He doesn't laugh it off. He doesn't treat it as science. He goes quiet. And when he returns home, he tells his wife something that doesn't sound like a bad trip. It sounds like a confession. I've made a terrible mistake. That's the crack. Because from that night on, Olson isn't just a scientist. He's a scientist who might talk. After the retreat, Frank Olson does not return to baseline. He returns unguarded. Colleagues notice it immediately. He admits doubts he once buried. He speaks openly about work he regrets. To coworkers, he questions the morality of the programs. To supervisors, he offers to resign. To a psychiatrist, he describes a collapse of internal walls, as if something that kept his thoughts separate has dissolved. This is not confusion. It is clarity without filters. Olson tells people he may need to be fired. He talks about experiments that went too far, about people harmed, about mistakes he can no longer justify. Friends describe him as restless, erratic, unable to stop talking, unable to stop telling the truth. The drug designed to extract information has finally done what it was meant to do. It has forced the truth into the open. Just not from an enemy, from one of their own. And that truth is poison to an agency built on secrecy, denial, and carefully maintained lies. Inside the system, that is not a breakdown. It is a breach. And breaches demand containment. So a decision is made. Olson will be evaluated. He is sent towards psychiatric care in New York City. He does not travel alone. The CIA assigns Robert Lashbrook, the same man who placed LSD into the bottle at Deep Creek Lake, to accompany him. As Olson's behavior becomes more unpredictable, so does the risk he represents. By the time they arrive in New York, Frank Olson is no longer just a troubled scientist. He is a liability. November 28th, 1953. New York City, the Statler Hotel. Frank Olson is not alone. He is sharing a room with CIA officer Robert Lashbrook. The agency's explanation later is simple. Olson is depressed. He's unstable. He needs help. But the details of that night refuse to line up. Just after 2 a.m., Frank Olson goes through a hotel window from the 10th floor. Not an open window, a closed one. The shades are drawn. Glass shatters outward. Olson is wearing only his underwear. His body lands on the sidewalk below. Lashbrook tells police he was asleep. When officers arrive, he is found sitting on the toilet with his head in his hands. He says he woke only after the crash. The CIA immediately labels it suicide. Case closed. But almost nothing about the scene fits that conclusion. Witnesses report no scream, no sounds of a struggle. The window frame shows damage consistent with force. And Olson had been under observation by the same people who dosed him. Within hours, CIA officials are notified. Within days, the story is sealed. No full autopsy is pursued that night. No sustained investigation follows. The agency moves on. For more than 20 years, Olson's family is told nothing about the LSD. Not the retreat, not the experiment. Only in the 1970s, after congressional investigations, does the truth begin to surface. The family receives an apology and a settlement. But questions remain. So, in 1994, Frank Olson's body is exhumed. The findings are unsettling. A forensic pathologist identifies a large hematoma on Olson's head, an injury consistent with a blow before the fall, not after. The medical examiner cannot determine who struck him, or why, but the implication is unavoidable. Olson did not simply lose his sanity, but the truth and the guilt of his actions caused a break in the man that could not be mended. The programs Frank Olson helped build were designed to be used on others. to extract secrets, to bend minds, to protect the system at any cost. In the end, those same techniques were turned inward, used on him. Files were sealed, settlements were paid, apologies were issued, decades later. No one was held accountable, and the research didn't stop, it evolved. The irony is impossible to ignore. The truth serum Frank Olson spent years helping develop finally worked. It didn't unlock a foreign enemy. It unlocked one of their own. And once the truth began to surface, there was nowhere safe for it to go. Whether Frank Olson jumped from that window or was pushed remains unresolved. But what is clear is that the moment honesty became a liability, his fate was sealed. Because in a system built on lies and secrecy, speaking truth is the most dangerous act of all. And when that system can no longer tell friend from foe, it doesn't stop. It turns on itself. And sometimes it destroys the people who helped build it.